In the constantly changing world of fundability, the big question is this: how are entrepreneurs and real estate investors like us, ones who want to grow our businesses and who are tired of paying for really expensive alternative lending, how do we tap into the most inexpensive money available and do it without the hassle of typical borrowing? That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. Welcome to the Get Fundable podcast with your host, Merrill Chandler.
Hey guys, Merrill Chandler. I'm back, and I've got a great podcast for you today. We're going to, when we come back, we're going to be talking about the crazy adventures that Professor Fundable, how I almost got a 30-day late and totally dropped my credit score 30 points, but knew what was happening, and still the scariest thing ever on the planet. When we come back, we're going to be talking about how I bought my lease out from my vehicle and the treacherous shoals that I had to navigate to make sure I came out alive. So I promise you, this is going to be a wild one. I'll see you in just a second. All right, guys, we're back. Merrill Chandler, your host of the Get Fundable podcast and the Get Fundable universe. And so today's episode is about the harrowing experience I had knowing full well the playbook of the lender and the dealer, and still it's unnerving. So let me give you a little bit of background. So as I've shared before, I was on a lease. My 24 months is up, and I was buying. I decided I was going to buy out the lease and get a new loan. So remember, as you learn in the boot camp, that if your balance is above 50% and under 24 months, you're getting both time factor and balance factor points for your on any installment loan, but including auto loans. So I'd run past my 24 months, and the interesting thing is that it was some serious navigating. So first, I'm going to tell you something that I learned, and so I'm passing it on to you. So we're on auto pay for my Jeep. And it's every single month, auto drafting. And just so you know, I was ahead of the payment curve, right? The payment slope. So I was already 25% under the payment slope. If you don't know what that is, get to the boot camp. Make sure that you have all the strategies that are going to make you, killer fundable, right? But for those of you who've been, then you know what I'm talking about. I'm ahead of the payment slope. But what I learned, as the story goes, I go to the dealership and they pull I'm buying the lease out, and I selected Wells Fargo. So it would be a tier 1 auto loan. But I also chose Wells Fargo because I have a relationship with Wells Fargo. And I know that they pull Experian. Experian is the highest of my high 700, 800 scores. So it's the highest. So just like I teach in the boot camp, again, if you don't know what I'm talking about, you got to go. There's just so much you can learn. But I'm already there. I tell them, pull an Experian from Wells Fargo. So to do that, they look at the payoff balance. And it goes, they check out what the payoff balance is. And it says that I'm missing a payment. Now, this is September 22nd. My payment is due, what I thought was my last payment was due on August 23rd. It's now September 22nd, went fully out. Remember, I always do. You want to go into that 25th month, as we've talked about in the boot camp. And so I'm in there ready to buy out the lease. I'm thinking I'm clear. And it comes back that I owe two payments. It was supposed to be, the final payment was supposed to be in August. Okay. So now I am panicked. Not only I am 1 day away from 30 days late, but because, just like I teach you in the boot camp, because August has 31 days, today might be the 22nd of September might be the 30-day late mark, and I am freaking pissed and I'm panicked. And so I call up my bookkeeper, and he says, "No, you've been on auto pay for 24 months." And I'm like, "I know. Then why is it showing that I don't owe just August payment, but I owe some mystical third payment, a second payment?" They said that I owed like $1,200 on, and when my payment's around $600, and they say I owe 12. So that to refinance the loan, I got to come up with $1,200 when I'm 30 days past what I thought was my last and final payment. My bookkeeper looks it up and says, "Oh yeah, August was your last payment." So I come to find out, as I'm doing all this research with my bookkeeper, call up the previous lender, and they say, "Oh yeah, we don't auto draft the last payment." Now there is not, and I'm like, where is the notification that tells me that you don't draft the last payment? Oh, it should have been sent to you. I'm scouring my emails. I'm bookkeeper scouring her emails. There is no notification that, oh, by the way, we don't auto draft the last payment, because if it's the last payment, it can be used. Many people pay that off when they're getting out of the lease. So they just don't draft the last one. No notification. This is a landmine, you guys. And I'm telling you right now, now that we've started we vet lenders. So we have some people who vet lenders 2 or 3 times a week in different in different areas of the country. So we're always asking all of these questions that nobody knows to ask. And a majority of lenders, especially tier 1 and tier 2 lenders, do not auto draft the last payment. We did not get a copy of this. I am now on what could be day 30 days late from my August payment. So I get back on the phone with my lender. Now, good news is I know what the playbook is, and I know how to talk to these guys. So the second somebody gets on, the whole story, guys, as bloody of a mess as it was. So I talked to the first gentleman, and I said, "Could you please tell me what the current status of this payment is?" He goes, "Yeah, you're 30 days late. It's been reported to the credit bureaus." I'm like, I haven't had a derogatory account since I got out of prison 15 years ago, going into the big house. I'm like, what? So may I please speak to a supervisor? Now this supervisor was mad. Props to this supervisor. So I get on. Now remember, you can't be panicked. You got to be almost emotionless. You got to be just a calculator. It's really like, please help me with this particular thing. I described the conversation I'd had with with one of his frontline team members, and I said, but you always ask the question without give them a leading answer. So I said, "Could you please tell me the status of this payment?" And he says, "It appears you're 30 days late." And I asked him, "Has it reported to the bureaus?" And he said, "I do not believe it has." Then I said, "Well, you need to notify or retrain your people in the on the front line, because this gentleman," and I use his name, "this gentleman told me that I was 30 days late and it had always been reported. So one of you is not being fully transparent with me." And he goes, "I do not believe this has been reported. However, I have the ability," write this down, you guys. If you're jogging, if you're in the car, figure out a way to remember this because you need it. He said, but I told him the entire situation. I said, we don't have a copy of anything that says that the last payment on the lease does not auto draft. I already had, by that time, when I found out that I was near 30 days late, I immediately made 2 payments to catch it up, because the dealership guy said that I owed $1,200 and change. So I made both of those payments immediately. Then that way I could come back when you're talking to the people and say, the second I heard, I already did it. I should be okay, because it's not close of business on what you're saying is day 30 days late. Now remember, August is the day they're counting, and there's 31 there. So we don't know if we're on 30 days of the September month or 30 days of August. So I made both payments, and by the time I got to the supervisor, I was able to say, look, that payment was supposed to have been auto draft. You say it wasn't. I accept that. But my dealer said that I owe 2 payments. I don't know where that second payment would come from, but because the payoff said that, I paid both of them. Now, we're gonna bracket right here. Remember how many times you've heard me say this? A number of times. You can be right or you can be happy. Most of us want to be right. I want to be happy, because no matter how much I jump and scream, if I'm 30 days late and they report me, it is a pain in the ass to try and go back and rearrange everything. It is easier for me. It is easier for you. Pay it, then fight for it. Pay it, then fight for it, because it's a machine and it will mow you down. So when the dealer said I owed 2 payments, didn't care. Made 2 payments worth, even though my bookkeeper said only if they didn't auto draft the last one, only 1 is owed. The payoff said 2. I paid 2. And you'll find out how right you want to be is if you make the payment, collections or charge, whatever you're trying to negotiate with somebody who says you owe them money, you'll find out how valuable that money is to you. If you pay it, then fight for it. Fight for it after the fact, but pay what they say is owed, because otherwise I'm going to get a 30, because if I only paid 1 payment, I don't know where the missing payment was. But if I paid 1 payment and they said, well, the second payment is actually August's, then I'd take the 30 and I'd get stuck with that. My score is going to drop 50 to 100 points, and it's going to obliterate my fundability for up to 4 years. So pay it, then fight for it. Okay, end bracket. All right. So here I am talking to this gentleman, and he's trying to help me. So here is the big secret. Here's the big thing to ask for if you find yourself in a similar situation. After you've paid everything possible to make sure that you are showing good faith. He said he volunteered, and this is how the entire universe of fundability came to be, because I've been my own crash test dummy, and I'm passing this one on to you guys. I did not know this was a thing for auto loans. I've done it on revolving accounts, but I've never heard it for an auto loan. He said, I'm going to predate the payment, because he could see that I had paid it earlier in the morning while I was doing everything to sew this thing up. He predated it. He said a few days. Now, I don't know if predating is a thing. He could have been trying to assuage me, because I was saying I didn't want the risk of going 30 days late. What can we do? Because my question to him was, what can we do to make sure that this is not 30 days late? Didn't know. I'm here. I made the double payment that the dealership said was on the balance. Will you please make this an impossibility? And then you have to say this every time, you guys, because if you don't acknowledge it, you can't fix it. I know this is a machine. I know that there's a process. every account goes through. What can you, as the human being talking to me, what can you do to stop the machine from reporting this? And he said, I'm going to predate your payment. And I said, you have the authority to do that? And he goes, yes, I do. So true or not, I have no clue, but ask. If you run into that similar thing, see if they can predate a payment. But you have to have already shown good faith that you made a payment. You don't wait until you're talking to the supervisor and go, oh, I'll make a payment right now. I did it beforehand. I did it before. The second I found out that the payoff that they pulled was 2 payments, I made that payment, and then I could go showing already in the past, showing good faith to pay that off. So, so he said, yep, I just made that happen. I'm saying, thank you, thank you, thank you. And he said, I only see 1 payment owed. And I'm like, do you know why they would show 2 payments on the payoff schedule? And he goes, I don't. I only showed the August payment wasn't paid. You already paid that, and I'm backdating the payment, so you're within the 30-day late period. Now, remember, I'm still past the late pay date for August, and I'm also past the due date. Remember how we talk about that even 1 day late can start ruining your fundability because you're not paid as agreed. So I know that now I'm just trying to save my 30-day late, because that's going to gut my fundability for years to come. Okay. And it's so hard to go up against the machine once it's already there, you guys. It's so hard. So you got to do this on the front end. So there I am. He's been a superhero for me, right? I find out which call center he's in, and find out that he's literally like a half an hour from one of my team members in Texas. And I'm like, note to self, send this guy one of those edible floral arrangement, candy arrangements, right? Because this guy, he deserves it anyway, because how well he treated me. But when we hung up the phone, I was still on pins and needles because I didn't know if it was true, even if he did what he said he'd do. So what do? What's our game? What's our rule? You call until you get the same answer 3 times. So I call up, get a different person, get a different supervisor, and you say, hey, I want to find out when my last payment was credited. And he was like, 4 days ago. I'm like, shh, yes. Because all he was willing to tell me a few days, right? Call again. Ask the same question, got a different person, talk to a frontline person this time, not a supervisor, just to see if it's on everybody's screens. And I said, when was my last payment credited? He goes, well, it was late. And I'm like, oh, pins and needles. But he said it was on September 20th. I'm like, oh. So front line, supervisor line, everybody's showing it that it was a few days early, or the 23rd, due on the 22nd. Yeah. So guys, then I went and I waited for the reporting date, and my reporting date, I believe, is the 15th. So it'd be the 15th of October, because I know the reporting dates of every single one of my credit accounts, my trade lines. So I'm sitting on that 15th, looking at my FICO all day on the 15th. Nothing shows, no 30-day late, no changes in score, nothing. I'm like, oh, praise the funding gods. But here's the thing. I knew the questions to ask. Even though I'm learning stuff as we roll this out, you guys, I'm still the crash test dummy in so many ways. but I knew the questions to ask. I knew who to talk to. That is why it's so important to have, if you run into one of these things, all of my clients who are listening, you guys know you can call up your team and literally have them remind you what are the right steps and how to make this work. So you cannot underestimate having on the fly, literally real-time support for emergencies like this. Okay. All right. But that's not the end of the story. So remember, I'm buying out my own lease. Now, I've never bought out my lease before. I've always leased and then picked up a new lease, turned the car in and picked up a new lease. But I have one of my roommates said that they wanted to, who has less than perfect credit, wanted my Jeep. And they said, but I can't buy it. Now, we've been roommates for literally years. I know the money that they make and everything. So I said, I will refinance it in my name and you pay me and it's your car. We can title it in your name, everything, but I'm going to carry it. Now, remember, that's like being the co-borrower. And you only do that. I recommend you only do that in high trust circumstances, high trust situations, right? But like I said, I've known this person for literally 2 decades, and we've been roommates forever. So it was no brainer for me, but you still have to dot your I's and cross your T's, right? So I'm buying it out and I can use the extra trade line on my installment portfolio. All right. So what I had never personally experienced, since I had never bought one out, remember, it was the only auto loan I have. What have I told you guys dozens, hundreds of times, is that the second an auto loan isn't currently reporting, you're going to drop anywhere between 10 to 20 points, right? Your score is going to drop because that auto loan is a key indicator for your FICO profile to make sure that you're fundable. So I knew that one was coming. But I didn't remember the math for my own situation because I'd never done it before for myself. So here we go. So the 15th of October comes by, no derogatory report. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm solid that it didn't report poorly, but it wasn't for another 15 days before it showed the bounce, because it was 30 days after I'd closed out the lease and made the last payment. So the 24th, it was right at the end of October, right? The 22nd or 23rd, whatever was the new reporting period. Score crossed all three, drops like 22 points. That was more than I thought, but I have a very narrow, tightly defined profile. So my auto loan is a significant contributor. And so on the 22nd, 23rd, whenever it was, significant drop in my score, 22 points. And each bureau, it was 19 on one, I think 22 on two of them. So there I am. I knew it was coming, but here's what I didn't remember, which is easy coaching when I'm working with somebody else. But you know how the mechanic is the one who doesn't, his car's kind of broken down, or we all tend to support other people, but sometimes don't support ourselves. I'm generally not that way, but I was in this regard. And it bit me in the ass because I knew I was going to drop. I forgot that when you buy the car out, I put the first payment down. So now I'm out the equivalent of 3 payments, right? 2 to terminate the old loan and a new one to put the first payment down, so that 45 days later, the next payment was due, but they don't report the first payment, you guys. So what I'd done is effectively reduced the equity, or reduced the balance by putting money down, that first payment that they asked for. but I didn't plan on waiting 45 days for the next one that would report 30 days later. So I'm waiting 45 days to make a payment and then another 30-ish for it to report. So I'm out 75 days with a 20-point score drop. Now, remember, I'm looking at, I'm sensitive to my look back period, just like I tell you to be. So here I am, I'm doing almost a full, I'm 15 days short of 90 days without an auto loan. I'm like, damn it. Now, it is likely I am never going to buy out because of this scenario. It is likely I'm never going to buy out a lease again. I did this one because I was doing my friend a solid. It was a win-win for everybody involved, except now I end up with an auto loan gone for my profile for almost a full, that first 90 days. So 75 of the 90 days. So I was like, okay, that was a hit. It reported. Now, this is what I teach at every boot camp. Every boot camp I teach this. And I forgot about it in my circumstance. So remember in the boot camp when I say that, yes, you're going to get your points for having an auto loan, but it takes 6 months for them to legitimize, for them to recognize a new loan, because FICO doesn't want, so many people pay off their cars within 3 to 6 months that they don't even start giving loan points back for the first until your sixth payment has been paid. So I'm sitting here going, I'm waiting for my score to bounce back 22 points. But part of the reason why I had 22 points is I had a mature 24-month loan that had been reporting faithfully. So I get back like 15 points, but I'm still down 5 to 7 points. And I'm like, why isn't it rebounding? And then I remember, because it doesn't even count it as a loan until the sixth payment. And I'm like, I should listen to my own boot camps. Now, you guys, 5 to 7 points is no big deal. And ultimately it's no big deal, but I'm sitting here, just the master of fundability. And so I want to give you guys a shout out. There are a lot of moving parts here. And I love that you guys keep coming back to the boot camps. I love that you keep rereading the book. I love your commitment. You guys are devoted to learning all of these things and implementing it. And it's okay to not know everything. I'm confessing right here, trying to be as transparent as I can, that even I forgot that I'm not going to get the credit until I make my sixth payment. Now, I did do exactly, my first payment was, I believe 15% so I'm now ahead. Once again, I'm ahead of the curve. And I even have, I put it away. I even received my statement that says your next payment isn't due until whatever, April. That's awesome. And yet our Wells Fargo allows us to continue to auto draft. So every month, I literally have 4 months worth of payments stored for whatever reason. I am ahead, just like I teach you. I'm ahead of that payment curve. And that payment curve is everything when it comes to showing the current lender that you've got their back. And it also broadcasts to future lenders that you are an amazing risk. So what are the take-home messages here? Make sure that you know what the policy is about auto drafts on the last payment of your lease. It might even be the last payment of, well, they usually on loans, it goes to a zero balance. So it's just a lease. Just make sure what the policy is so that you don't go late on that last payment. So there's my landmine number one. And I stepped on that one. I love it, guys. I may be a few steps ahead of you, but I'm still navigating the landmines. All right. And I just want you guys to know that I share everything I possibly can from my own experience. So avoid the landmine of the last payment on a lease. They may not make that payment. Second, you've got to know when your exact 30-day late is given a particular month. And I found out both of my people said that it was today. I dodged that bullet because the supervisor was the only reason why I dodged that bullet was because the supervisor was able to predate my payment since I'd already made earlier in the morning, I'd made that payment in good faith. I was even able to use in my argument that I made 2 payments when the supervisor told me I only owed 1. But the pay down said I owed it 2. I'm not going to argue. Landmine number 3, do not argue with what they're saying. Pay it, then fight for it. Because if I were wrong on this one, I would have gotten a 30-day late, guys. Do not fight ahead of time. You can be right or you can be happy. Do not fight. Do not fight ahead of time. If they say you owe it, pay for it, and then fight. Okay. 4th one, send a fruit basket or whoever is your superhero in bailing you out of a situation because they deserve it. And you get to acknowledge somebody so just because you know the game, you need a partner at the lender to play the game well. And so that was my supervisor rep. So make sure you take care of anybody who hooks you up. Make sure you do something, but make sure you take care of them. All right. So the story isn't over. This is the fun part. So I'm teetling along. I made the double payment. My balance was 0, according to the buyout. And so I got the new loan, got a killer loan for a used car, killer loan at 4%. But it was tier 1. So I'm paying a little bit of a premium on my percent loan because it's a tier 1 bank. That's how I do. Installment loans don't move the needle as much. So you could have gone tier 2 or tier 3. But I wanted to leverage my relationship with Wells Fargo because I plan on continuing growing my credit lines and business loans with them. So it was all strategic on my part. Remember, I teach you in the bootcamp as well. Invest dollars in interest to continue to get, because the credit lines that I have with Wells Fargo, the business loans that I've had, I do far more with that than the 1.5 that I'm going to save on my auto loan. Okay. Next. So I'm sitting here, we pick up the mail, and there's a check for the lender for exactly 1 payment. I had double paid, and so I still don't know what it was, but the dealer showed me the payoff schedule. I paid it for the reasons I've shared. But then I get in the mail free money because I'd rather be happy than right. And I got a check for exactly 1 payment. Check in the mail, which then I went to Chase, which is the bank, and cashed that check, and I called it a bonus. So, you guys, in this instance, I was my own coach. I was my own best counsel. So my clients out there who are listening, make sure that you leverage your team. Make sure you leverage their expertise. If you're not a solutions coaching client, then do whatever it takes to make sure that you have the resources to know to ask the right questions. If you're a funding hacker and part of the funding hacker group, go to more boot camps. Come to the Q&As that I hold twice a week, Tuesdays at 4 p.m. Mountain and Thursdays at noon. Come to those, ask questions, learn as much as you possibly can. This is Merrill Chandler, your host of the Get Fundable podcast. And I will sign off as Merrill Chandler dodged a fundability landmine Chandler. And I hope to see you shortly. Bye now.
Thank you for listening to the Get Fundable podcast. Please leave comments because Merrill would love to read about your aha moments from this episode. And be sure to visit getfundable.com to read our blog, get important links, join our community, and much, much more, like ordering Merrill's tell-all book that is changing the world, The New F Word. And you gotta tell your friends about this podcast because we want them to get fundable too.